I'm Andrew Newby. I've been working on an Academy of Finland project at the University of Helsinki since 2012 and it's finishing this year in 2017. It's just on different elements of the Finnish and Irish famines which occurred during the 19th century. This particular element of the project is looking at the way in which these famines were memorialised. In the Finnish case, the trigger was really the frost, the perpetual enemy of the Finnish people. But in some respects you could also argue that this was a crisis which was developing over many years. The 1860s were a very hard time in terms of harvest failures in Finland, and the frost of September 1867 precipitated this disaster. Certainly it's a trigger, but it's maybe not the only cause. We've currently found over 80 local memorials in Finland, but I believe there's probably many more still to be found. It's a very big country, and new ones seem to be coming to light all the time. So they're generally speaking in churches or nearby churches. They're often in the vicinity of mass graves. So it was maybe considered at a certain point that people remembered that these people were buried during the famine years, but they'd not been given a respectful burial. We're currently in Lahti, which actually is the largest town in Finland to have a memorial related to the famine years. And what's specific to this memorial and some of the other memorials in the close vicinity of Lahti, all of these memorials are in the vicinity of the St. Petersburg to Riihimäki railway. Now, the railway was developed in the 1860s. The financing of it was negotiated by the autonomous Finnish government with the authorities in St. Petersburg, partly as a famine relief work. So people were able to get famine relief as long as they worked on the railway. And the railway construction, as with other parts of Finland, canal construction, for example, or forest clearance, it was tied to relief aid, usually in the form of food. So very evocative memorialisation of these sites, especially linked to the railway construction. Well, I think it's important not to think there's a correct way to commemorate these kind of tragedies, these kind of catastrophes in a national history. But it's very interesting to be in Finland and look at this from an outside perspective and wonder why we remember things so differently in Ireland. And one of the most obvious reasons, of course, is the fact that Finland was responsible for its own famine relief. One of the arguments made in Finland, actually, is that the very existence of these railways and canals were sufficient memorials to the deaths and the hard work of the generations that have gone before to help create the nation which emerged then in 1917, when full independence arrived. And yet, the Finnish case does maybe teach us from an Irish point of view that in the circumstances where you have a Home Rule Parliament, it's not inevitable that famine will be avoided, depending on the decisions that are made in that Parliament. I think from my point of view, what's the most interesting thing is that is to learn about other countries, their reactions to famines at the time, but also the commemorations that have followed on from it. And I think that's a very interesting aspect of my own work.